Alright guys, what's up here? Today, I got my buddy Thor here. We're going to give you a video on the most perfect and cheap kayak fishing setup. Now that spring's coming, everyone's wanting to get out and go fishing, and you know, everyone's on a budget right now. So I feel like this would be a good video for this time. So first of all, you got to have your kayak. So the kayak I have here is a Pelican Bounty 100. You can find a kayak like this for like $500 at your local outdoor store, Dick's, Dunham's, whatever. And it's nice that you get a fishing kayak because they have the rod holder placement. So like you have two in the back and you can put this one up front. So that's three rod holders basically. So that's a big advantage to any other cheaper kayak that wouldn't have a rod holder. It's also nice that it has a seat that can be adjusted to your liking, which makes it really nice. So you have your kayak and you get a paddle. Any cheap paddle is good. I mean, people might want a fancy one, one that looks cool. It doesn't really matter as long as it gets you across the lake and back. That's all that matters, in my opinion. Other people have different opinions, but that's their opinion. So after you get your kayak, you have to have bait and tackle. So in my situation, I have 3 holders, so I take 3 rods. So these are my 3 go-to rods that I take fishing on my kayak. Got a line there. So my first and favorite rod that I take on my kayak is a open reel Lew's fishing rod. None of these are super expensive. This is like a $120 complete setup here. So you know, I always take 2 open reels because you can throw just about anything on an open reel. So this one's pretty long, so I like to put it in front of me on the kayak because when you're casting, you don't always want a tall rod behind you, which sometimes you can't help it, it's whatever. So 1 open reel there and another open reel. This one's not expensive either. This whole setup is like $100, if that. It's an Abu Garcia, cheap as well. But it's nice, you can throw anything you want on it. And then I always take 1 bait caster with me, which this is an Abu Garcia bait caster, which is pretty nice, you know. It's probably $250 altogether, which isn't too bad honestly, but it's a really nice bait casting rod. So I always take this with me too, because sometimes you want to flip, pitch, whatever you want to do with a bait casting rod, these come in super handy. So you get your kayak set up with your rods. That's the next step. Any rods work, whatever you prefer. So you got your rods, you gotta have tackle. So if you're like me, you have a couple tackle boxes, they're all just jam-packed full of lures, and you wanna take all of them, but you can't fit them all in a kayak. So you get 1 tackle backpack or bag, whatever, and you get all your main lures into that. So then when you're on your kayak, you can't have too much stuff, so you wanna condense it down to the most important stuff. So personally, I just found an old milk crate that was at home, and if there's a spot here in the back, you can take your milk crate, set it back there. So you get your old milk crate out of your dad's garage or whatever, you get an old rope or whatever, and you just tie it down. That way it can't go nowhere. So now that you got that tied down pretty good, you can put whatever you want in that. So you just get your main lures out. You say, okay, all of these are your main lures condensed, like I said before, so they all just fit back here perfectly. Just throw them in. They're not going to go nowhere. The milk crate's tied down. More than likely, or hopefully, you can have waterproof boxes. If not, it doesn't matter. You can throw some oh, you want some of these plastics in there, or rubbers, you just throw them in, doesn't matter. Pliers, throw them in. Your scale, just throw it in. It really doesn't matter what you put back there because it's not going nowhere. So then you just leave your whole tackle bag in the truck or your car, whatever you're taking, and that way you have condensed it down to this, and you don't have a big bag up here in your way, so you can fish easier and better. So you got this condensed back here, you got your rods and your lures, And now you're like, oh man, what if it's windy and we need an anchor? Well, all you need is a super cheap anchor. It's like 5 pounds. This literally sits up here the whole time. It never falls off. Get you some paracord or whatever you want to use. You can just tie it down to anything. I tie it down to these straps right here because those aren't going anywhere, and you can just throw it off and tie it up tight, and then you got a nice anchor on your kayak. Super cheap. Find one at a old antique store or whatever, wherever you can find one. Doesn't really matter. And if you want to go a little overboard, I always take a fish finder, and my optimal fish finder is a Humminbird Fishing Buddy Max DI, so it has down imaging on it, which this is not necessary at all, but I like it because if I'm on a lake, I want to be able to mark some fish. Even though I'm on a kayak, you still have the opportunity to see fish on a fish finder without the expensive setups. This was, you know, a couple $100, nothing too expensive. So I have my mount always on my kayak because this is hard to put on, so I put it on once and it just stays there. And then you can just mount it up. So just like that, I have my rods, my tackle, my anchor, and my fish finder without any hard work, without anything heavy to carry, any trailers to pull. It all fits in the back of your truck perfectly. You can catch big fish, little fish, fish all year round, whenever you want with this cheap setup. I mean, just with the kayak, one rod, a few pieces of tackle, you could fish for like $500. Super cheap, easy, great way to fish on a budget. I love it. I always fish in my kayak. And if you're into filming, you can mount places to put your GoPro. There, I have a mount up front there, your chest mount, whatever you want to use. So it all makes it super easy. This is my optimal setup here. You can stand rods up in this box and tie them down. So you could even have 4 more rods back here if you wanted. It really doesn't matter. So in my opinion, this is the great setup for kayak fishing. Got the Pelican kayak. There's my rod on the front. You know, you got your anchor, fish finder, Humminbird. This is super nice. Pretty fancy, if I say so myself. Got your tackle in the back, rods. You know, you have your paddle, which is, I didn't get it out just because I'm just videoing this, but that's a super easy and cheap way to kayak fish right there, guys. In my opinion, that is the optimal fishing kayak that you can get for cheap and get out and catch fish.